Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt the energy shift? You noticed the fake smile before the words even formed. You caught the flicker of jealousy in someone's eyes. You sensed the pain behind someone's confidence and no one else saw it. And in that moment, you thought, why do I always feel this deeply? Why do I see things others ignore? And why does it feel more like a curse than a gift? You're not imagining it. You're not too sensitive. You're not broken. You're aware. You're tuned into a frequency that most people can't even hear. And while the world is busy scrolling, numbing, pretending you notice, you pick up the micro shifts, the hidden resentment, the unspoken truth. But here's the real question. If this ability is so rare, why does it often make us feel isolated, misunderstood, and emotionally exhausted? Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, called this differentiated perception. It's the ability to see beneath the mask, to feel the tension others hide, to decode the unconscious patterns people are afraid to face. But Jung didn't call it a superpower. He called it dangerous. Not because you're wrong for feeling what you feel, but because the cost of that clarity is often invisibility. Let me explain. Jung wrote about patients who could sense everything, not in a mystical, magical way, but through a finely tuned psychological radar. He said they could walk into a space and feel who was lying, who was hurting, and who was wearing a social mask so tight they'd forgotten their real face. They didn't have to ask questions, they just knew. And while that might sound like a dream, it was actually a nightmare. Why? Because when you see too much, you become uncomfortable to be around. Not because you're aggressive, not because you speak harshly, but because your presence reflects what others are trying to ignore. And let's be honest, most people would rather stay blind than be seen through. Jung observed this in his own patients. These perceptive souls couldn't keep friendships, not because they were flawed, but because they made others feel exposed. They couldn't thrive in workplaces, not because they weren't capable, but because they disrupted the unspoken rules that everyone pretended not to notice. They weren't mentally ill. They were mentally awake. And that kind of wakefulness, it comes at a price. You stop being able to play the game. You struggle with small talk, with shallow connections, with pretending everything's okay when you know it's not. You become the mirror. And most people, they're not ready to see their reflection. Now, I want you to hear this. You're not alone in this experience. There are people like you, people who feel deeper, see clearer, notice what others won't. People who carry the emotional weather of a room on their skin. People who walk through life with open hearts and heavy eyes because they're always absorbing. And Jung didn't see this as a defect. He saw it as evolution, but only if you learn how to carry it. Because here's the truth, no one talks about seeing deeply without the skills to handle it will break you. It will wear you down, isolate you, and make you question your sanity. You wonder why others don't care as much. You wonder why they laugh while you ache. You wonder why you're always the one who has to feel it all. And maybe you've tried to switch it off, to numb it with distractions, to dim it so you can belong, to tell yourself you're just being dramatic. But I want you to hear me clearly. Your perception is not a flaw. It's not something to suppress. It's a signpost pointing toward your potential. But potential without preparation becomes pain. That's what Jung saw. That's what I've seen in myself. That's what so many of us are waking up to. You weren't born to see everything just so it could destroy you. You were born to see it so you could transform it for yourself and eventually for others. But transformation starts here. You must stop seeing your sensitivity as a problem and start understanding it as power that hasn't yet been trained. You need to build the emotional muscles to carry what you see, to hold what others hide, and to stay yourself even in a world that wants to numb you. Because there are two paths for people like you. The path of collapse. You drown in the weight of it all. You isolate, you overthink, you become bitter because no one else gets it. Or the path of integration. You learn to name what you feel. You build boundaries. You find the few who can hold your truth. You rise not despite what you feel, but because of it. This is your moment to choose. And so I want to leave you with this. What if your deepest pain, feeling too much, seeing too much, caring too much, is actually the very clue to your life's purpose? What if your sensitivity isn't here to ruin you? It's here to reshape the world, starting from within. Take a breath, reflect on that. Then ask yourself, will I continue to carry this gift unconsciously, or will I finally learn to own it consciously? Because the world needs more conscious carriers of perception, not martyrs, not victims, pioneers. And if this message stirred something in you, leave a comment and share how this resonates. Like this video if it reminded you of who you are, and make sure to subscribe because this journey isn't over. We're just getting started. Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing with me. Have you ever been blamed for simply speaking the truth? Ever shared a gentle insight and been met with anger? Ever reflected someone's pain back to them, not with judgment, but with care, only to have them attack you like you were the problem? It's confusing, isn't it? You didn't create the storm, you just noticed the clouds. But somehow, you became the lightning rod. This is the brutal reality of shadow projection. Carl Jung saw this pattern over and over again in his clinical work, and honestly, so have I. It's something I call the mirror effect. See, when you've developed the ability to perceive beyond the surface, when your intuition is sharp, your insight is deep, and your heart is open, you don't just see what island, you see what's hidden. You reflect back what others can't accept in themselves. And that's where the danger begins, because most people aren't ready to see their shadow. They're not prepared to face the parts of themselves they've buried, the jealousy they deny, the insecurity they mask with overconfidence, the anger they've pushed so deep they forget it's still shaping their choices. And when you show up clearly, calmly, compassionately, and you reflect even a sliver of that shadow, you become the threat. You become the mirror they want to smash. Jung wrote it simply: when someone's shadow is reflected back through another person's clear perception, the unconscious has two choices: integrate the shadow or attack the mirror. Most people choose the second. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's passive-aggressive. Other times, it's outright sabotage. They twist your intentions, accuse you of being too much, too intense, too negative. They label your insight as drama, your clarity as confrontation. Why? Because it's easier to blame you than to face themselves. And if this sounds familiar, you've likely experienced what Jung called the scapegoat phenomenon. This is what happens when the person who sees clearly becomes the one who is blamed for everything. The group doesn't want to acknowledge. In families, you're the troublemaker. At work, the difficult one. In friendships, the dramatic one. In relationships, the overthinker. You didn't create the dysfunction. You didn't cause the wound. You simply refuse to stay silent about it. And for that, they punish you. You become the emotional trash bin, the person others offload their guilt, shame, and unresolved pain onto without ever saying it directly. You feel it in your body. You carry it in your mind. And worst of all, you start to believe it. But here's the truth. You are not the problem. You're the pattern interrupter. You're the person who won't pretend. You're the one who sees behind the curtain. And that's uncomfortable, not for you, but for them. You see, Jung said that our greatest teachers are the people who irritate us. Why? Because irritation is often the soul's way of showing us what we haven't healed. Let me say that again. What irritates us about others is often what's unhealed within ourselves. So when you show up with depth, when you express concern with honesty, when you question what's usually left unspoken, people have a choice. They can grow or they can scapegoat. And sadly, many people choose the latter. But this is where your power lies, in recognizing the pattern without internalizing the blame. You have to train yourself not to absorb the projections of others. Not every emotional arrow is yours to carry. Not every accusation is a reflection of your truth. When someone lashes out at you for speaking up, when they accuse you of causing pain just because you noticed it, pause, breathe, ask yourself, am I being attacked because I was wrong or because I was right before they were ready? This distinction will set you free. Because if you don't learn to recognize this pattern, you will shape your identity around guilt that was never yours to carry. You'll dim your light to protect people from their own shadows. You'll silence your voice to avoid their discomfort. And you'll start to believe that your perception is the problem, when in reality, it's your superpower. But a superpower without self-awareness becomes a self-destruct button. That's what Jung warned us about. And that's why this journey isn't just about seeing more clearly. It's about holding what you see wisely. So let me give you a practice, a mindset shift for the moments you feel scapegoated. The reflection rule. When someone reacts disproportionately to your insight, don't immediately assume responsibility. Instead, ask, what in me is triggering what they haven't faced in themselves? And if the answer feels true, let it inform you, not destroy you. You are not here to fix everyone. You are here to witness, to reflect, to invite growth, not force it. Because transformation isn't about forcing people to see what they're not ready for. It's about holding your clarity without letting it harden into bitterness. Yes, you will be misunderstood. Yes, you will lose people. Yes, you will be blamed for saying what others were afraid to hear. But if you learn to see the scapegoating for what it is, projection, not truth, you'll stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You'll stop apologizing for your perception. And you'll start standing in the integrity of what you know, because here's the highest truth. Your job isn't to make people feel safe in their illusions. Your job is to be real, even if your reality threatens their denial. The scapegoat doesn't stay scapegoat forever. If they stay conscious, if they keep growing, if they stop internalizing projections, they become something far more powerful. A mirror with boundaries, a seer with self-respect, a voice that no longer whispers. That's your path. That's your calling. Not to carry other shadows, but to illuminate your own truth so clearly that even the darkness can't deny it. Let's get something clear. Not all deep feelers are the same. Not all intuitive people carry their gift in the same way. Some of us feel the pain in the room. Others analyze the pattern before it happens. Some absorb emotions. Others absorb energy. Some are walking x-rays of people's souls. But here's the thing, no one teaches us, not even school, not even most psychology books. There are types of perception. And understanding your type isn't just useful, it's essential for your mental health. Because if you're living with a powerful gift you've never named, that gift will confuse you. It'll control you. It'll overwhelm you. And eventually, it'll break you. Carl Jung discovered this nearly 100 years ago. He studied what he called introverted intuitive types, people with what we now recognize as extraordinary pattern recognition and emotional perception. But he didn't stop there. Jung found that these people fell into 4 distinct categories, each with its own strengths and each with its own shadow. So the question I want you to hold as we go through this section is this: which type are you? Because once you see it, you can finally start mastering it. Type 1, the feeling intuitive. This is the empath who feels everything before a word is spoken. They walk into a room and immediately know who's hurting. Not because they saw something, but because their body reacts. This person doesn't just detect pain, they absorb it. They're the ones who suddenly feel anxious around someone who's smiling, who feel sad for no reason until they realize they've been around someone hiding depression. They're like emotional tuning forks, vibrating with the energy around them. And while that sounds noble, it's exhausting. Because the biggest danger for type 1 is emotional confusion. They can't always tell which emotions are theirs and which ones they've picked up. They cry and don't know why. They get drained without understanding it. And they begin to think something is wrong with them when actually something is powerfully right. But their gift needs structure. They need solitude like oxygen. They need grounding rituals. And above all, they need to remember feeling someone's pain is not the same as being responsible for it. If this is you, it's time to learn emotional separation, to become a vessel of compassion, without drowning in other people's storms. Type 2, the thinking intuitive. This type sees patterns before they become problems. They forecast behavior the way meteorologists predict weather. They look at someone's choices and know that relationship is headed for collapse. That business deal will implode in 6 months. That friend is burning out and doesn't even see it. But here's what makes this type unique. They don't arrive at these insights through logic. They arrive through unconscious pattern recognition. It's fast. It's clear. It's uncanny. This person is often labeled too analytical or cold. But truthfully, they're just ahead of the curve. The struggle for this type is being believed because they often just know things without being able to explain how. So people call them paranoid, overthinkers, controlling. But Jung understood something powerful here. These people don't overthink, they overperceive. They need to trust their instinct, but also learn to communicate it without sounding like prophets of doom. Because if this is you, your job is not to convince everyone. Your job is to warn with wisdom, then step back with grace. You're not here to be right. You're here to offer foresight and release the outcome. Type 3, the sensation intuitive. This type feels psychological truth in their physical body. They sense what's happening with others somatically. They get a headache when someone nearby is emotionally overwhelmed. They feel tightness in their chest when someone is suppressing rage. They notice illness before symptoms appear. They're often dismissed as too sensitive. But what they're really experiencing is psychosomatic intuition. Their body is a sensor. It doesn't lie. But here's the danger. If they don't learn to filter, their body becomes the battleground for other people's emotional wars. They get sick often. They struggle to sleep. They have mysterious aches, fatigue, and burnout, and doctors don't have answers. If this is you, the path forward is physical ritual, yoga, breath work, cold exposure, somatic release. Time in nature, you must train the body to clear what it didn't consent to carry. Because when your body becomes the temple of emotional truth, you need to clean it daily like sacred space. Type 4, the pure intuitive. This is the rarest and the most overwhelmed. These individuals see everything, feel everything, and don't know how to process any of it. They're flooded. Images, emotions, visions, dreams, gut instincts, all happening at once. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. They often feel like they're going crazy. They struggle to organize their insights. They jump from thought to thought without resolution. The truth? They're not crazy. They're just receiving more than their system has learned to hold. The danger here is collapse. They often burn out. They isolate. They become overwhelmed by their own intuition because it has no container. If this is you, your task is structure, journaling, scheduling silence, creating systems for your insights, speaking to grounded mentors, learning to name what you see one thing at a time. You don't need less perception. You need more containment. You are not chaotic. You are unstructured awareness waiting for a framework. Now, pause for a moment. Which one feels like you? Maybe you're a hybrid. Maybe you've lived in more than one type. That's okay. The goal isn't to fit into a box, it's to recognize your wiring so you can stop blaming yourself for what the world never taught you to understand. You are not too much. You are highly tuned. You are wired for depth in a world obsessed with surface. But remember, every type comes with a strength and a shadow. And the danger isn't in having perception. The danger is in not integrating it. If you don't know your type, the world will decide for you. They'll label you dramatic, intense, fragile, paranoid, cold, or weird. But if you do know your type, you'll stop defending your truth. You'll start living it. This is where power begins with clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about how you're built. Clarity about how to move through a world that wasn't built for people like you. Let me ask you a question one asks intuitive people. What happens when you see everything but don't know what to do with it? What happens when your perception is sharper than most, but your emotional foundation hasn't caught up? What happens when you carry everyone else's energy, but don't know how to protect your own? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Perception without integration isn't a gift, it's a trap. It doesn't elevate you, it isolates you, it doesn't awaken you, it overwhelms you. And if you don't learn to work with it, it starts to fracture your life one piece at a time. Carl Jung saw this over and over again. He studied people who were deeply perceptive but unprepared for what they were seeing. And the result wasn't spiritual elevation, it was psychological collapse. Jung called this the problem of superior function, when your greatest ability becomes your greatest burden because you never learned how to carry it consciously. So today, I want to walk you through the three major dangers of unintegrated perception. And more importantly, I'll show you how to avoid each one. You and danger one, disrupting the collective unconscious. Here's something most people never realize. Every social group survives through unspoken agreements. Families, companies, communities, they all function because of shared illusions. Everyone silently agrees. We won't talk about that uncle's addiction. We'll pretend the boss's behavior is normal. We'll act like mom's anxiety doesn't affect us. We'll smile through the discomfort. Now, enter you, the intuitive one. You see through the illusion. You feel the tension beneath the surface. You name what others spend their lives avoiding. Suddenly, you're the threat. Not because you said anything cruel, but because your truth shatters their agreement. This is what Jung meant when he said, the individual who perceives too clearly threatens the collective cohesion. You didn't come to destroy the group, but your awareness makes their denial uncomfortable. And that makes you dangerous not to society, but to the systems that rely on unconsciousness to function. So what do? The solution: learn the art of conscious timing. There's a difference between seeing something and needing to speak it immediately. Wisdom isn't just knowing the truth, it's knowing when to share it, how to share it, and who is ready to receive it. If you see something toxic in a family system, take a breath. Ask, is this the right moment? Are they in a state to receive it? Or will my words be used to reinforce their own resistance? You don't have to stay silent, but you also don't have to throw your clarity into a battlefield when no one is asking for it. Speak when the energy is open, not just when your awareness is activated. Danger 2, psychological isolation. Let's talk about one of the heaviest burdens sensitive people carry, the feeling of being alone in your perception. You look around and no one else seems to notice what you're seeing. They ignore the red flags. They laugh through the tension. They live on the surface while you're drowning in depth. And you start to wonder, is there something wrong with me? Jung wrote, the curse of consciousness is that it cannot be shared with those who do not possess it. That hit me the first time I read it. He didn't say you're broken. He said you're aware in a world that doesn't want to be, and that awareness is lonely, not because it's wrong, but because it's rare. So what do? The solution: find the few who understand. You don't need 100 people who get you. You need 2, maybe 3. People who've done their own inner work, people who aren't threatened by truth, people who've stared into their own shadows and survived. These people don't flinch when you speak honestly. They don't shame your insights. They welcome your perception because they've had to wrestle with their own. Find them, seek them, build with them, because isolation isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a sign you haven't found your tribe yet. Don't shrink your awareness to fit in with the unconscious. Expand your connections to include those who live awake. Danger 3, identity dissolution. This one's subtle and probably the most dangerous of them all. See, when you're highly perceptive, you absorb more than just information. You absorb energy. You absorb emotion. You absorb psychic content. And if you're not careful, you lose track of what's yours and what's not. You start carrying everyone else's guilt, everyone else's sadness, everyone else's frustration, and you confuse it for your own. Jung called this participation mystique when your psychological boundaries dissolve and your identity becomes blurred with the collective unconscious. That's when burnout happens. That's when breakdowns happen. That's when you stop recognizing yourself in the mirror. So what do? The solution: practice daily energetic separation. This isn't just mindset work, it's maintenance. You need spiritual hygiene the way you need physical hygiene. Ask yourself daily, what emotions am I carrying that aren't mine? What beliefs did I absorb from the people I was around today? Where did I lose my sense of self to make others comfortable? And then clear it. Take a walk, breathe, journal, meditate, clean your energy field the way you'd clean your home. Because if you don't set boundaries around your gift will dissolve you. Let me remind you of something deeply important. Seeing everything is not the problem. Seeing everything without tools, boundaries, or community, that's the problem. Your perception was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to awaken you. But like any advanced software, you need to learn the operating system. You need updates. You need practices. And you need to remember you are not here to carry the weight of the world. You are here to develop the strength to carry your truth in the world without losing yourself in the process. There comes a moment in every aware person's life when they say, I can't keep living like this. You're tired of absorbing everyone else's chaos. Tired of being the mirror everyone runs from. Tired of feeling like your insight is a burden instead of a blessing. You don't want to unsee the truth, but you do want to stop suffering because of it. And that's the turning point. That's when perception becomes power, but only if you learn to integrate it. Carl Jung was one of the few who understood this. He didn't just study the mind, he journeyed into it. He didn't just talk about the unconscious, he confronted it. And through that inner war, he discovered a sacred process that every intuitive, sensitive, and perceptive person needs to master. He called it the individuation process. But I call it something simpler, the path from overwhelm to ownership. And today, I want to walk you through Jung's 3 phases, the very same ones he used to heal himself and guide others back into alignment. Fase 1. Recognition, differentiation. Know what's yours, know what's not. This is where the healing begins. Because here's the raw truth. Most of your pain doesn't even belong to you. You're carrying the heartbreak of your parents, the fear of your partner, the shame of your friends, the pressure of your culture, and you've mistaken it all for your identity. Jung called this participation mystique a dangerous psychological blur, where the lines between you and everyone else vanish. And if you're a deep feeler, you know exactly what that feels like. You wake up heavy, but you don't know why. You're triggered, but it's not your wound. You feel sick, but nothing's physically wrong. This phase is about discrimination, not in the judgmental sense, but in the spiritual sense. The ability to say, this sadness, it's not mine. This anger, it's his, not mine. This urgency, this pressure, this shame, not mine. Jung said it like this. The first task is to establish what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Without this, there can be no individual development. Here's how you start. Practice silence daily, not just for peace, but for clarity. When the noise settles, your voice returns. Journal with 2 columns. Column A, what I feel today. Column B, what I know is mine. Watch how much doesn't match. Ask your body, what are you holding that doesn't belong to me? Your body will answer. And when it does release it, breathe it out, cry it out, move it out. Because the longer you carry what's not yours, the longer you delay becoming who you truly are. Phase 2, shadow integration. Face your own darkness or you'll obsess over everyone else's. This phase is uncomfortable, but it's also where your real power starts to rise. See, a lot of perceptive people become obsessed with other people's shadows. I can see her jealousy. I sense his insecurity. They're hiding something. And while those perceptions may be accurate, they can become a spiritual distraction. Because the truth is, the only reason you can spot it in them so quickly is because you haven't fully faced it in yourself. Jung said it best. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So when you get deeply triggered by someone's behavior, instead of pointing fingers, ask, where does this live in me? When have I done that? What part of me still fears becoming that? It's not about blaming yourself. It's about reclaiming your wholeness. You contain every trait you perceive in others. Yes, even the ones you hate, even the ones you deny, even the ones that scare you. And when you own that, you stop judging people for their shadows and you start helping them from your light. Here's how to practice shadow integration. Track your triggers. When someone annoys you, pause and write it down. Ask, what am I really reacting to? Name the trait. Is it arrogance, neediness, control, indifference? Reflect, where have I done that before, even in small ways? Forgive yourself. Let compassion create clarity. Jung knew that integration wasn't about becoming better than others. It was about becoming whole within yourself. The less shadow you carry unexamined, the less projection you'll suffer. PHAS 3. Conscious participation. Hold space for others without losing yourself. This is the final phase, and it's what separates the overwhelmed empaths from the integrated leaders. It's what Jung called conscious participation in the collective unconscious. Let me explain. By this point, you've learned to tell what's yours and what's not. You've faced your own shadow, and now you're no longer afraid of what you see in others. Now, you're ready to serve. But here's the key. You're not serving from burnout. You're not healing others to escape yourself. You're showing up from overflow, not emptiness. This is where your perception becomes medicine, not martyrdom. You start to hold space for people without absorbing them. You can witness someone's pain without losing your center. You become what Jung called a psychological container, someone who can temporarily hold the weight of others without mistaking it as their own. This is what spiritual maturity looks like. You don't get entangled in everyone's chaos. You stand with calm presence. You speak when the energy is open. You listen without the need to rescue. And you walk away when your presence is being misused. How do you maintain this level of awareness? Create sacred solitude. Daily stillness isn't optional, it's your anchor. Stay connected to grounded people. Let others reflect your growth back to you. Use your gifts intentionally. Don't read people without permission. Don't offer insight to those who aren't ready. Return to shadow work regularly. Keep your lens clean. Because integration isn't a one-time event. It's a lifestyle. Jung's entire legacy boils down to this. To see clearly is not enough. You must carry what you see with wisdom, humility, and deep self-awareness. Only then does your gift stop being a burden and start becoming a legacy. There's a sobering truth you need to know. Seeing clearly doesn't guarantee peace. Insight doesn't automatically equal evolution. Awareness alone isn't enough. In fact, some of the most perceptive minds in history, the ones who saw beyond the collective, the ones who felt the world's pain before the world did collapse under the weight of what they saw. Carl Jung realized this after decades of study. And today, I want to walk you through the stories of three giants, all of them blessed with extraordinary perception, but only one of them integrated it. Only one of them transformed the burden into beauty. Only one of them turned deep perception into spiritual contribution. Let's begin. Case 1. Friedrich Nietzsche, the collapse of the unintegrated seer. Nietzsche had a gift. He could see through everything. Religion, society, culture, self-deception. He tore through illusions like fire through paper. He was ahead of his time, painfully so. He saw a world losing its moral compass. He saw the emptiness growing in modern man. He saw the crisis of identity long before psychology had a name for it. But here's what Jung noticed. Nietzsche never integrated his insight. He became consumed by it. He didn't use his perception to heal. He used it to tear down. He didn't learn to carry what he saw with compassion. He wielded it like a sword. And eventually, it crushed him. Nietzsche lost touch with reality. He became isolated. He descended into madness, not because he was wrong, but because he couldn't hold what he saw. He was like a mirror with no frame. He reflected everything but couldn't contain any of it. And this is the danger we all face when we live from perception without humility or structure. You become so identified with what you see that you lose contact with who you are. Your awareness becomes your personality. Your depth becomes your weapon. Your gift becomes your identity. And that is the beginning of psychological collapse. Case 2, Meister Eckhart, The Integration of Sacred Perception. Now contrast that with Meister Eckhart, a 13th century mystic. Jung studied deeply. Eckhart also saw beyond the veil. But instead of weaponizing his perception, he sanctified it. He spoke about the soul in a way no one had heard before. He didn't just perceive spiritual truth, he embodied it. Jung admired Eckhart because Eckhart saw deeply and stayed grounded. He wasn't overwhelmed by what he saw in others, he held it. He didn't preach to elevate himself, he shared wisdom to uplift others. And perhaps most importantly, he didn't use his insight to judge, he used it to connect. Jung wrote of Eckhart, he saw clearly but spoke in ways that invited understanding rather than resistance. This is what happens when perception meets humility. When insight is partnered with spiritual maturity, when the mirror is supported by mercy, Eckhart wasn't just a mystic, he was a bridge. He showed the world what perception looks like when it's led by love, not ego. Case 3, Carl Jung, The Personal Battle of Integration. Now let's bring it home to Jung himself. You might think Jung had it all figured out. He was the father of analytical psychology, the man who gave the world concepts like archetypes, the shadow, and the collective unconscious. But what many people don't know is Jung barely survived his own mind. After his split from Freud in 1913, Jung entered a 6-year period he called his confrontation with the unconscious. During that time, he faced visions, voices, inner dialogues, a flood of raw psychic content that nearly pulled him under. He later wrote, I was menaced by a psychosis. I stood at the edge, but I was saved by one thing, my decision to understand what was happening. You see, Jung didn't deny what he saw. He documented it. He drew it. He dialogued with it. He turned it into the Red Book, a journal that became a spiritual map for others. Where Nietzsche collapsed, Jung contained. Where Eckhart preached, Jung translated. Where many would have gone mad, Jung went conscious. And that is the path of integration. Jung realized something revolutionary. This level of perception is not a mental illness. It's the next level of consciousness, but only if you choose to evolve with it. So, which path will you walk? Each of these men had perception, but only one transformed it into sustainable wisdom. This is the choice that stands before you too. Will you be the ungrounded visionary who burns out in brilliance? Will you be the weaponized mirror who wounds while trying to awaken? Or will you be the integrated presence who sees deeply and serves wisely? Let's be clear. Integration doesn't mean you see less. It means you see cleaner. It means you stop identifying with every emotion you pick up. It means you stop over-explaining what you intuitively know. It means you stop absorbing pain and start transforming it. The power of reframing. Let's reframe your story right now, because I know some of you have believed things that aren't true. I feel too much. I must be broken. I see too much. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm always misunderstood. Maybe I should just stay quiet. Here's the real story. You feel deeply because you were built for depth. You see patterns because your mind is trained by experience, not delusion. You've been misunderstood because you're living ahead of the emotional curve. Your perception is not the problem. Your lack of training around it island, but now you have tools, you have frameworks, and you have examples of what happens when perception is neglected and when it's nurtured. So here's your reflection for today. Are you on Nietzsche's path, overwhelmed, isolated, sharp but burned out? Are you moving like Jung, learning to hold what you see with structure, ritual, and responsibility? Or are you becoming like Eckhart, someone whose perception heals more than it harms because it flows through the heart? You get to decide, not overnight. But with every step, let's talk about something most deeply intuitive. People are too afraid to admit we don't just want to be understood. We ache for it. We've learned to play strong. to act like we're fine walking alone, to tell ourselves, maybe no one's meant to get me. But the truth is, we all want one thing: to be seen, not just by what we show, but for what we carry quietly. And if you've ever walked into a room and felt invisible, if you've ever shared your truth only to be shut down, if you've ever offered your insight and watched people flinch, mock, or ghost you, then you know what I'm talking about. Carl Jung knew this too. He worked with people who saw so deeply, they began to question their own sanity. Not because they were wrong, but because they were alone in their awareness. So he gave us a gift, a reminder, a map. The individual cannot become fully conscious in isolation. They must be witnessed by others capable of recognizing their authenticity. In other words, you don't need everyone to understand you. You just need the few who can. So today, I want to help you find them. Let's walk through Jung's 3 kinds of relationships that are safe for the deeply perceptive, the types of people who won't see your insight as an attack, your emotion as a burden, or your silence as rejection. TYPE1, fellow individuated people. They've walked through their own fire. These are the rarest kind of people. And when you find one, you'll feel it immediately. You'll be in conversation and suddenly feel your nervous system relax. No performance, no pretense. No need to shrink. These people aren't intimidated by depth. They live there. They've done their shadow work. They've stared into their pain. They've lost things that made them rebuild from the ground up. And because of that, they don't need you to be easy. They just need you to be honest. You'll know you found someone like this when they ask questions that go beyond, how was your day? They sit in silence with you without discomfort. They offer reflection without projection. They're more curious than defensive. They invite your clarity instead of avoiding it. These are the people who speak a language most never learned. And when you find one, don't take it lightly. This is the friendship you can grow in. This is the partnership you can expand in. This is the kind of presence that reminds you you're not too much, you're just around too little. TYPE2. People on the path of inner work, they're not perfect, but they're honest about it. This group is larger. They're not fully individuated, but they're awake. They've started asking deeper questions. They've begun therapy. They're reading, meditating, doing the inner inventory. They're still learning how to navigate their emotions, but they're open. They're trying, and the most beautiful part, they might not fully understand your depth, but they value it. They see your perception as something sacred, not something strange. These people will say things like, I've never thought of it that way. Can you tell me more? That's hard to hear, but I'm listening. I want to understand. I may mess up, but I care. They won't always get it right, but they'll never make you feel wrong for being you. These are the ones worth growing with. Pour into them if they're willing to grow with you, because they remind you you're not the only one evolving. And that gives your journey companionship, not just solitude. TYP3, natural containers. They're calm, centered, they hold space effortlessly. Now, this type is fascinating. They may not be highly intuitive themselves, but they're incredibly grounded. These are the people you instinctively feel safe around. You share something vulnerable, they don't flinch. You cry, they don't panic. You get quiet, they don't assume the worst. They've often lived full lives. They've experienced grief, heartbreak, reinvention. And because of that, they know how to hold space without trying to fix, control, or escape. These are the quiet rocks in your life. You'll recognize them by their presence. You'll feel it before they even speak. These people don't need to be gifted to be valuable. They're not deep in the traditional sense, but they are steady. And when you're a perceptive person, overwhelmed by the noise of the world, that kind of steadiness is like spiritual oxygen. Keep them close. Now, let's be real. You might be thinking, but where do I find these people? The answer isn't in a location. It's in a frequency. People who see you are drawn to the version of you that's done hiding. So if you want to attract the few who understand, you must first become the person who no longer apologizes for seeing deeply. Here's what that looks like. You stop downplaying your gut instinct. You stop shrinking to avoid discomfort. You stop explaining away your insights so you don't sound weird. You stop editing your truth to make others feel safe in their denial. And instead, you speak gently but honestly. You lead with love but hold boundaries. You listen deeply but stop absorbing what isn't yours. You show up as a mirror with grace, as a feeler with filters, as a truth speaker with compassion. And when you live like that, you stop attracting people who need you to be shallow and you start drawing in people who feel like home. Ways to recognize a safe soul. They ask genuine questions when you speak. They hold your vulnerability without interrupting it. They don't pathologize your insight, they respect it. They're not threatened by your silence or your intensity. They're more interested in connection than correction. Let me leave you with this. You were never meant to walk this path completely alone, but you were meant to walk it honestly enough that only those truly aligned could walk beside you. Not everyone will get you. That's okay. You don't need a crowd. You need connection. You don't need fans. You need witnesses. You don't need noise. You need mirrors, the kind that reflect not just your light, but your becoming. And when you find even one person like that, you begin to heal. Because finally, you no longer have to explain yourself. You just get to be, let's start with a truth most people never reach. Your gift was never the curse. Your unconscious relationship to it was you were never broken for seeing what others ignored. You were never weak for feeling what others buried. You were never too much. You were simply early, ahead of your environment, ahead of the emotional skill sets around you, ahead of the collective consciousness. And because of that, you were misunderstood, not because you were flawed, but because you were untranslated. But now you've walked the path, you've seen the dangers, the projection, the loneliness, the emotional flood. You've learned the tools, differentiation, shadow work, boundaries, stillness. You've studied the greats, Nietzsche, who collapsed, Eckhart, who served, Jung, who integrated. And today you stand at the edge of your final transformation, not to hide your gift, not to apologize for it, but to offer it as cultural medicine. You see, Jung didn't believe that your awareness was just personal. He believed it was evolutionary. He said, the individual has always been the carrier of the living spirit, the one who brings about the change in society. Translation, every time you integrate what you see, every time you refuse to numb, deny, or retreat, every time you walk with clarity through a foggy world, you help shift the culture forward. You're not here to fit into the unconscious. You're here to be a pioneer of what's next. Not a savior, not a martyr, not a preacher, but a mirror with mercy, a container with consciousness, a leader who leads with depth, not dominance. So what does this final evolution actually look like? Let me break it down into 4 clear stages. Stage 1, recognition without overwhelm. You acknowledge your gift, but you're not crushed by it anymore. This is where you stop fighting your perception. You stop calling it a burden. You stop trying to numb it to survive. You say, yes, I see more. Yes, I feel more. And yes, it's powerful, but I am not afraid of it anymore. You've built the inner scaffolding, the discipline, the filters, the pauses. Your insight no longer burns you from the inside. It illuminates your path forward. 222, integration. Without isolation, you're fully yourself and still connected to others. You no longer need to choose between truth and connection. You've found your people, or you've become patient enough to wait for them. You speak when it matters. You stay silent when it doesn't. You're not chasing acceptance. You're grounded in alignment. You stop explaining your gift. You start embodying it. You become a walking vibration of clarity, not by what you say, but by how you move. And now people feel safer around you, not because you're shallow, But because your depth is no longer volatile, it's integrated, it's balanced, it's beautifully still. TD, stage 3, service without sacrifice. You begin to offer your gift without depleting yourself. This is where everything changes. You no longer feel the compulsion to save people. You no longer give from emptiness. You no longer blur your identity in the name of being helpful. You understand that your perception is not your identity. It's your tool. You use it when it's invited. You offer it when it's safe. You share it when it's received, not when it's resisted. This is where you move from burdened empath to embodied healer, from passive observer to conscious contributor. Your insights become medicine, not because they're clever, but because they're timed with love. You don't carry people anymore. You guide them, and you do it without leaking energy, without bitterness, without burnout. You finally know what it feels like to give without losing yourself in the process. Stage 4, legacy without attachment. You begin living for something bigger than your name. This is the highest level of transformation. You don't need credit. You don't need applause. You don't need everyone to get it, because you know you're building something that will outlast you. Maybe it's a community, maybe it's a message, maybe it's a family line healed by your awareness. Maybe it's a life lived so fully, so mindfully, that just your presence becomes generational wisdom. You don't force your gift. You don't market it. You live it. You become a presence that shifts rooms not by being loud, but by being aligned. And when people ask you, how did you become this version of you? You'll smile and say, I stopped treating my sensitivity as a defect and started treating it like the sacred blueprint it was always meant to be. Let me tell you something. The world doesn't need more noise, more productivity, more empty perfection. The world needs more people like you. People who see, who feel, who understand deeply, but who have learned to hold it with wisdom, because those are the ones who prepare humanity for what's coming next. So I'll end with this. You were never cursed for seeing too much. You were called. You were chosen, not by fate, but by consciousness itself. And now your job is simple. Keep doing the work. Keep integrating the insight. Keep refining the delivery. Keep living with clarity, compassion, and consistency. Because that's how you go from being a misunderstood soul to a cultural midwife of the next level of human awareness. You're not here to explain your gift. You're here to embody it. You're not here to save everyone. You're here to stay sovereign while serving selectively. You're not here to heal the world alone. You're here to build quiet legacies that ripple outward for generations. Let the world misunderstand you. Let them mislabel your clarity. Just make sure you don't mislabel yourself. You're not too much. You're not too intense. You're not broken. You are what Jung called a pioneer of consciousness, a soul born to walk before the collective was ready, so you could help prepare the path for those who come next. And now that you know, walk it boldly, speak it wisely, offer it with open hands, because this world doesn't need you to fit in. It needs you to rise integrated, awake, and unapologetically whole.